Let's talk about comma, ellipsis, and dash. Now, comma, ellipsis, and dash are punctuation, and they are used when we want to distinguish idea from one another or when we want to add emphasis to a particular idea. So some people just don't know how to use these correctly, and they might use them wrong. Sometimes we use comma, but sometimes we use dash and ellipsis. So we tend to mess it up sometimes. Commas are separates in dates. Commas are important when we are writing out dates. So first, when we write out the full month, day, and year in a date, we need a comma between the numbers. For example, my father was born on November 12th, 1949. Second, if we include the day in the date, then we need a comma between the word. So the test is on for example, the test is on Monday, February 26th, 2021. Lastly, if the date is not at the end of the sentences, use a comma after the year. For example, on June 5th, 2018, they will announce the winners. If we have a list of 3 or more items, now we also need to make sure that each item in the list is separated from the rest by comma. Remember, do not add a comma to a list with only 2 items. If a list have only 2 items, then we just need to add the word "and" between them. Remember, do not add a comma between a list with 2 items. For example, before we go camping, we need to make sure that we have an extra batteries, warm clothing, and marshmallow. This list has 3 commas, so it needs commas. But in this example number 2 here, I brought ketchup and mustard for the hot dog. This list only have 2 items, so it doesn't need a comma. We only need the word "and" between two of these words. Now, if we use any of the conjunctions like for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so, these are the fanboys. So if you have any of these fanboys conjunctions, then we have to combine 2 complete sentences. We have any of these conjunctions to combine 2 complete sentences, then we need to use a comma before the conjunction. For example, I was feeling good enough to go to the football game, but I wasn't feeling good enough to finish my homework. So the 2 ideas in the sentences are completed and could have been written as a separate idea. So they're connected with a comma and conjunction, but now that's all about comma. So this might be the punctuation that we use the most. So let's move on to the next, ellipsis. Now we use ellipsis here to show missing text. An ellipsis often shows something that is left out. So ellipsis is a term we use to refer to 3 periods used in a row. So we can use them at the beginning, middle, or end of the sentences to show reader where something has been left out. Not like comma, separated two idea out. Ellipsis here show kind of like, use them to show where reader where something has been left out. For example, there's researchers conducted a 12-year study to examine the lifestyle of pygmy chimpanzee. Ellipsis. The end result was an astounding discovery that we humans share 98.7% of their DNA. So here, the ellipsis, if you want to use an extremely long piece of textual evidence in your writing, and you can use ellipsis to take the place of some of the text. Just make sure you do not change the meaning of the quote with a ellipsis. So let's say we are listing out things, but there's so many things that we use the ellipsis to to show reader where something has been left out, to show that there are more, just still more thing. However, some of our basic have been named out, and there are just a lot more, but we use an ellipsis here to show that there are still something more and they has been left out. Now, an ellipsis here can also add suspense. Sometimes author will use ellipsis to indicate an unfinished thought that could have major implication for the story. So let's say we're thinking something and then we didn't want to say it out anymore. Like when you might read some story and then you see like a character saying something and then she doesn't want to say it anymore, so he or she doesn't want to say it anymore, so he or she just stop. And in the story here, in the book here, they indicate it by using ellipsis. For example, I wish, ellipsis, said Mary, but she quickly cut off her thought when she realized that other people were listening. So this ellipsis in this story show that Maria didn't finish her thought. And an ellipsis here can show all that. So it's not like we're watching a movie to see like Mary are stopping, quickly cutting it off because she realized that something that she doesn't want to say anymore. So in the story here, they show us this by using ellipses. And lastly, dashes. Dash only have one uses. Unlike ellipsis and comma, dashes draw attention. When authors use dashes within the sentences, they usually surround or introduce a word that they want us to pay attention as reader. So a dash is stronger than a comma, but they are less formal than a colon and more relaxed than parentheses. So they're kind of like in the middle. But remember, don't use dashes too often, or they won't be as effective. For example, there was no way to avoid the truth. Dashes, the truth was going to hurt though. The dash in the sentences help draw attention to the way the author's talking about the truth. So, some people might realize that the dashes here is kind of like, we can use a comma here too, but we can also use a colon or a parentheses. However, like I said, a dash is more stronger than a comma, and they're less formal than a colon and more relaxed than a parentheses. So they're kind of like in the middle. So when you don't know whether to use any of these, I think you might just use that. So in today's lesson, we learned about comma, ellipsis, and dash. Comma helps separates in dates, whether they are write out in full month, day, and year, or include the day and the date, or the date is not at the end of sentences. And also, comma used to separate items in a list. Separate item not only in a list, but like comma used to separate item in a list and item that we name out a lot too. And then commas also used after fanboys, used after conjunction to combine these two complete sentences together. But we also need to use a comma before the conjunction, just to separate two of them, to make sure that it doesn't sound too out of breath. And then there's ellipsis, which is to show missing text and used to add suspense to the story. And then there's dash, which is used to draw attention. So thank you for coming and have a great day.